Good afternoon. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate that. Little audience participation. So just want to thank everybody for coming. As I do at the start of every one of these end-of-season press conferences, I just like to get a few thank yous out into the ether, and then I'd like to review the year, talk about the future, and then let you guys fire away any questions you might have to ask me. I'll stay here as long as you like. So first, I want to thank the basketball operations staff. It's a tremendous group of people, incredibly dedicated, and it's a true privilege for me to come to work every day with such a great group. I do think the family atmosphere that's been created here is a byproduct of the community that we live in, and that makes it possible. I also want to thank the business staff. They do an incredible job supporting our players, creating a great environment for our fans. It's a thankless job and one that they deserve a ton of credit for as we end year 11, roll into year 12. Want to thank our fans from all over the world for their support over the last 11 years and into year 12. It's impossible to make anything happen without that type of support, and we're grateful. Our sponsors, obviously, it's a critical aspect of things for us here in Oklahoma City. Is the second smallest market in the league. We've been blessed to have tremendous corporate support, and we're incredibly grateful for them as well. And then, as I thank you guys every year, I want to thank the media for the way you guys do your jobs. We know you have a job to do, respect the job you have to do, especially in a changing environment with all these new mediums and technologies, and I've got 400 iPhones looking at me right now, not people, but that's where we are, and we're grateful for the relationship and the way you guys have covered the team, not just this year, but over the years. One thing I did want to note before I jump right into the season is just, in thanking everybody while I was writing that out, it made me think about the fact that what the team stands for, what the Thunder stands for, is something that people in Oklahoma City and Oklahoma can really come together over. It's been a huge driver for so many different things, economically, socially, and all those things are critical going forward. But that doesn't happen without all the people we just mentioned, not just the organization, players, staff, ownership, etc., but also just you guys in the media, the sponsors, the fans. Everyone comes together to make it something special. And we're really grateful to be a part of that and privileged to be part of that. So I want to thank everybody for creating something that everyone in the city and in the state can come together over. With respect to the season, obviously we're disappointed that we are not still playing, just like every team that is not in the playoffs anymore. If I had to define the year in a couple words, I would say capability and inconsistency. For 70% of this past season, we were playing at an extremely high level, and I felt like we were playing some of the better basketball that we've seen in Oklahoma City, just with respect to the style of play goals we laid out, the defensive improvement that we tried to establish from last year to this year, pace of play, athleticism. I really felt like the players and the coaches were doing an excellent job of that. And they created an extremely high standard. We were on our way to having the third best record in the league against the top 10 teams in the league. We were playing a really balanced game. And, unfortunately, that seems like a long time ago because 30% of the year or so, we struggled to meet our own standard, and that's, and I use the word disappointing. I think disappointing is the end. I would use the word frustrating to define really the month of March, because when you show that you're capable and you come into the year with a vision or a plan for how you want to try to be better from one year to the next, and you're executing, and you come back and you're not able to meet that, I mean, that's something we have to own. That's also frustrating because you know what you're capable of and you're not able to reconnect with that. So the month of March is probably the thing that we'll look at the closest. I mean, that's one of the things when put our record up on the board during the exit interviews, pre-All-Star, post-All-Star, 38 and 20, and then 11 and 13, but really 6 and 13 in the month of March before we won 5 in a row heading into the playoffs. But unfortunately, that last little stretch there wasn't enough to kind of correct ourselves, and we ended up getting beat by a really good Portland team. So we have to study that month of March. The process of how we're going to go about that and how we're going to go about all the other aspects of how we create a path forward, that's going to be the same as every year. So I do think it's important that there is some distance to that because, myself included, I'd probably be most focused on the 30% of the year, and I'd be working off of impression, emotion, reaction, and that isn't necessary. That's probably the most simple way to solve a complex problem, which leads you in most of the time the wrong place. So I'll sit down with Billy. I'll sit down, let him get away, let him get some thoughts together before we sit down and meet. I'll sit down with Clay, debrief the season like we always do. All of our evaluators, all the different pillars need to take a look at the year as a whole. We'll come back. We'll sort it out like we always do. We'll create a plan, try to find a path forward, and we'll get to work. As I said earlier, we're not looking to be fast. We're not looking to be quick. We're looking to be rigorous. We're looking to be the same problem-solving group that we have been over the years, which is pretty methodical. And we just don't have the liberty to be, I would say, kind of momentary problem solvers. Like, we have to look at it a little deeper. With respect to the team, so coming into the year, I felt like we were positioned pretty well from a depth standpoint. Last year when we sat here, I think majority of the questions were about our defense in the second half. So we really focused on that. And I felt like we had really good redundancy behind Robertson. In the event he was slow to return, obviously we couldn't have foreseen that he was going to miss the whole year. And I thought Ferguson and Diallo during the first part of the year did an excellent job. We ended up as the 4th best defense in the league, and that's with pretty big slippage in the month of March. I think if we were more consistent in that month, we might have been a little bit higher, but top 5 is obviously good enough. And I thought Ferg and Diallo and some other guys all stepped up. The spot on the roster, to me, that we didn't have redundancy and continued support was when we lost Alex. And that's on me. I thought Alex was going to have a breakout year, to be honest with you, and be a pretty big part to this team. He made huge strides. And, when we lost him, excuse me, in the end of February, we were 18 games over 500. We were playing really well. It was a little bit before that. We're 18 games over 500. But once we got into March, we started to feel his absence more. And I didn't have somebody else that could step in that was sitting on the end of the bench. And as I said before, once Wes Matthews went to Indiana, there really wasn't a lot of other options out there. And that put some stress on us offensively. And that's, you never want to be in that position. But there's no perfect team. And as I said earlier, majority of the questions last year about the defense, getting that corrected, I felt like even with the hit we took with Dre, we had some guys to step up, and I think the players and coaches did a pretty good job overall getting ourselves to be a top 5 defense. But you're not going to solve one thing without creating another situation somewhere else. And, that's something we'll have to continue to look at, and I'm sure you guys have plenty of questions about that. I'm happy to answer them. As we look into the offseason, the key for us, it always is the same. It's, okay, how do we create a path forward? How do we create as many options as possible? To be honest with you, going into year 12 after 11 years and being in the playoffs 9 out of 10 years, with changes all around us, it gets harder and harder, But if I sat here last year, I wouldn't have been able to foresee or predict, what we'd been able to do at that point in time. So I can't tell you, what that looks like. I can only tell you that we're going to look for literally every single way to improve the team, both externally and internally, but that's no different. And I personally, I love the puzzle. I love the challenge. I love this time of year. I love the opportunity to be with the people that I work with to try to solve these things. There's a price to the longevity that we've established, and we got to keep grinding and figure out ways to make it last longer. This will be the first time in 4 years that we aren't entering the summer trying to convince a franchise player not to go to a bigger market. So I'd say that's welcome on our end of things. When you're going through those things, I think it's relatively unprecedented that an organization has faced that 4 years in a row. I'm proud of the way we've navigated that, even though sometimes it hasn't gone our way. You do things and you stress yourself and you push yourself, and trying to convince those guys to stay is a challenge. The fact that we have Russ, Paul, Steven, Terrence, Dennis, Jeremy, really the core of the team, the guys that play the minutes under contract, is a stability that we welcome, and it allows us to go into the offseason with a little bit of a different perspective than we've had in the past. And that's helpful because I think more than likely, based on kind of where we are strategically, like our greatest path for improvement is going to be the improvement of our core group. And that improvement is probably going to be greater than any type of impact that we're going to be able to have with like a marginal addition here or there when you kind of think about the group that's returning and the fact that we primarily play 9 guys. So, we'll look at everything external. We'll beat the bushes like we always do. If I sat here last year, I didn't think Nerlens Noel would be playing for us. He was a big factor on our defense being what it was. I had no idea that we'd end up with Dennis Schroeder in August. So you just got to work the plan. You've got to be consistent. And in our case, what works for us is being pretty methodical. So just in closing, I would just say, look, we've established a certain standard here over 10 years, averaging 52.5 wins per season. Second best net rating in the league over the last 10 years. And we're disappointed that we're not, still playing. At the same time, we have to take, ownership over that, and we got to take a hard look at like where we are as a team, what the options are, and look at those and see how we can make it better. But that's part of competition, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you talked about how you had the great start, and then obviously March came. Is there anything from your point of view, from what you saw, that brought about that 6-13?
Well, I mean, Mike, I think that's the crux of the question for me. Before we can even start thinking about, like, how do we solve for that? We don't have the liberty of just making in like a snap reaction or coming in with an emotional, vantage point. If we did, we'd forget the fact that, we won 11 and 12. Paul George was going to be the MVP. We're going into Toronto and winning. We're going into Golden State and winning, going into Houston and winning, beating Milwaukee. We played really well. That seems far, far away. So I don't think you can discount the fact that we got our ass kicked in the playoffs. There's no getting around that. But I think anyone objective and anybody that is more than a momentary problem solver would probably take a step back and look at the whole thing. To try to answer your question is to say, I don't have that answer, and I would think that if I did, you shouldn't listen to me, because I would just be coming in here with an emotional perspective, which, like, as a leader, I can't do that.
Sam, you said you will give Billy some distance and then you guys will talk. Can you just clarify what his status is in terms of coaching?
Sure. Yeah. So, we anticipate Billy being back. If anything were to change on that, we would have let you know. And I know some of you guys have had questions about that. But for us, for me personally, I always think that it's important to give the coach of the team time to reflect and decompress. These jobs are really, really hard. And, before you can get into, okay, what did we do well? What did we lay out? What could we do better? What could we do different? How do you see the team? What did you hear in exit interviews? What did I hear in exit interviews? I think you got to get away from it. Otherwise, you're operating in you're just being drenched with the end result, which matters, but how you got to that point, I think, is equally as important when you're making assessments to inform the future. So we'll do that just like we always do, and we'll inform our off-season planning from there.
Sam, do you see the inconsistency being because last year you guys started 8-12, you finished 40-22. That's a 65% winning percentage. And the same thing happened this year, except it happened at the end of the year. Do you see those two as? Is there a common theme with these last 2 years?
I mean, these are good questions. And I just want to stress to you guys, a lot of the questions you have are questions that I have. The difference is I'm responsible for digging into them, understanding them, and evaluating them for more than what makes me feel good. I'm not looking to feel good or to justify something or validate something. I care so much about this organization and this team. I really want to understand it deeply to the point empirically that I believe it, not just telling myself it must have been this or it must have been that. That's not enough for me, or any of us in the organization. I do think last year we sat here and there was a clear inflection point. All right, we lost Robertson, and at that point things started to really get destabilized. That didn't happen this year. In fact, I think the players and the coaches deserve a lot of credit for the fact that we came into the season with some stated goals that I voiced, on all of our behalf at this table, saying, listen, we need to be an elite defensive team. We need to play with great athleticism. We need to turn our offense into transition so we can take advantage of the team speed that we have. And we need to get Russell as many opportunities at the rim as possible, both in transition and our other guys, good looks in transition, because if our defense plays to its potential, we should be pretty good. Offensively, we wanted to be a ball movement penetration team. We wanted to be a team that made quick decisions. And when we did those things, for 70% of the season, we were winning at, a high level. I know it seems distant, and I'm not sitting up here trying to tell anybody that we had this brilliant season, because I'm not. But I also can't sit here and say that we weren't the fifth best net rating team for 70% of the season, or that, we were pretty hard to play against, home or road. That's what you're looking for. We didn't have an inflection point, like an injury. In fact, the fact that Dre couldn't come back and we had Terrence step up and had really, where Terrence went from one year to the next is pretty impressive. Diallo helped us win a lot of games. He was starting. He went through his rookie ups and downs, but he contributed. He stepped up. Schroeder played a lot in place of Dre. So I don't think there was an inflection point. I think we came out of the break and we just couldn't match that level of intensity, or I shouldn't say intensity, more the standard that we ourselves created after the Utah game. So we'll look at that. Some of it, listen, we played tougher teams. There's a million different things. That's why I need to meet with all the different pillars of the organization, because everyone has a perspective and opinion, and I want to listen to those.
One thing you did deal with in March was Paul had a couple of hurt shoulders. Now it seems like he's going into surgery. Could be out of an extended period of time right now. All that's kind of up in the air. But if he is going to miss significant time at the beginning of the season, how do you go about making up for that, not only on the defensive end, but the offensive end, where you guys really struggled down the stretch, and especially in the playoffs?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of hypothetical and speculation in that question. So I would just say, in the event that any player is missing time for whatever reason, if it's for the birth of a child, or it's because they're sick, or because they have an injury, like, we'll account for it. We did it with Dre. If it happens to be a player of great magnitude, that's going to be harder for most teams. But we've dealt with it before in the event that that happens. But I'm not going to sit here and pontificate about pontification.
Sam,
So I just want to, excuse me, I just want to clarify, and pardon me if I didn't hear it in the initial answer.
You don't have to apologize.
Right. But you said you anticipate Billy being the coach. Does that mean that he's going to be the head coach starting the season next season?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything to change. As I said, I mean, that might be the one thing you did miss. As I said, nothing changes. I haven't had a chance to sit down with him. I do think getting his perspective on things is important because there's nobody that works harder than him. And, you know, if anything, I think he needs to take some time to think through the season himself and have a really good conversation. But yeah, no, nothing's changed. If something were to change, obviously we would have told you guys.
Sam, we know Russell to be a good person. He's never been in trouble off the floor. But as the face of the franchise, as the face of the organization, do you find it distracting, or his dealings with the media, or even some of his dealings with some individual matchups on the floor? Do you find that at all going away from what you want to be as an organization?
I'm glad you asked that question. You know, no one's asked me that question. So let me be clear about a couple things. I might be a little bit redundant on something you said, but number one, you know, Russell Westbrook's been here for 11 years. The reason why there's so many people in the room and so many people watching the press conference right now, a big part of that is the fact that Russell Westbrook has helped us to achieve a certain level of sustained success that's relatively rare in pro sports. The last time that I checked, he has never had a problem off the floor in a character vein. His reputation there is sterling. Philanthropically, he's done incredible things for this community, and he's also done incredible things for his hometown in Los Angeles. With all that being said, he's not perfect, right? None of us are. And, you know, but I'm not going to let 11 years or 10 and a half years of his contributions and performance be completely overshadowed by a couple pretty tough months, okay? And so we talk about those things. And as the leader of the team and the face of the franchise, as you said, you know, we'll have those conversations, and there might be times that we might disagree about some of that stuff. He has a point of view at times. He's an adult. He's a man. I respect that point of view. The one thing that I think everybody that works for the Thunder and plays for the Thunder has always had in mind is that we always have to put the organization first. And there's no one person or individual that can ever afford not to do that. At the same time, like, we can't discount the things that Russell's done over the years and the things he's been able to achieve. And we certainly want to take those things for granted. But for me, it's more about understanding not the outcome, but it's also like, what's the root of that? And meeting somebody and understanding, like, okay, like, why did you take in that direction? We might disagree about like how it was handled. And at times that's perfectly fine with me, you know, because you have 11 years of invested into something that everybody cares so deeply about. So yeah, would we prefer if he handled a few things differently? Sure. We've talked about that. I also think it would probably be worthy and noteworthy to establish the fact that he made some adjustments to that particular approach. And I think that's a sign of tremendous leadership and a sign that he is understanding that when he speaks, he is the reflection of so many different people. And I know how much he cares about the team because I've seen it for 10 and a half years. Sometimes I wish that the conversations that I have with him, you guys could see. You know what I mean? Just in terms of the way he can express himself and the points of view he has. Because he's a pretty smart guy, and he makes you think. And, you know, I want to understand, kind of continue to build that, because I think some of the things you referred to are positive in the sense that we can sit down and talk about him. But we're not going to let a 2-month period where, and things get significantly magnified when you lose in the first round. But we'll sit down and talk about those things, and we want to course correct, because there's nothing more important than the Thunder to all of us.
Sam, in years past, you kind of mentioned that Steven makes these subtle jumps each year. Did you feel like he did that in some areas again this year, or how did you feel about his season overall?
Again, I think he's a great encapsulation of this kind of like 70-30 concept, which is that, like, in the beginning of the year, he was dominant. I mean, he's a big reason why we were, 18 games over 500 and playing so well. He was calling for the ball in the post. He was really effective down there. He was putting people in the basket. He was rolling hard. He was doing the Steven Adams things that help you win games that don't always show up. You know what I'm saying? Those effort plays and the physical plays, And then toward the end of the year, obviously, he didn't play as well. But that's not just him. That's a group thing. It's not just Steven. I think the number one thing for him is he's got to become a better free throw shooter. And as a team, like, I know much has been made about our shooting in general, and we're probably more focused on efficiency than we are on just quote unquote like shooting. But shooting happens all over the floor, and our free throw shooting, if it just gets to league average, would have a significant impact on our offensive rating and our net rating as a result. Our ability to convert in transition would make a significant impact, especially for a team that's in transition as much as we are. It's kind of like our free throw shooting is like kind of like I've used this expression before. It's like leading the league in walks and pickoffs. Like, we're there, we're doing the hardest thing, but we're not capitalizing, and that's a team thing.
Your thoughts on Paul George and just what he was able to accomplish this season, second in the league in scoring, tops and steals, how he grew in year 2 with this team.
I there's a point in the season where it was like game by game, I was saying to myself, I didn't realize how good this guy really was. He was playing at an exceptional level on both sides of the ball. To me, the thing about Paul that's so remarkable is he impacts the game for every minute he's on the court, because he plays both sides at such a high level that he's if he plays 35 minutes, that's 35 minutes of impact you're getting, because he can score with it. He can make plays for other people, but on defense, he also can negate, really great scorers. He truly is a two-way player and one of the best, if not the best, in the league. And he had it really going early in the year, and he was leading us. So I think, obviously he was slowed a little bit at the end, but I was kind of impressed, through the year. Excuse me, my whole house is sick, so I got this box of tissues down here, so excuse me, sorry.
Sam, was that the end of that particular answer?
You can jump in there.
Okay. We saw in the last series how important shooting is in the playoffs with Lillard. Where do you think the offense goes from here with Russell having the struggles that he had this season?
Well, I mean, listen, with respect to Russ, we're 2 years away from him shooting 34% or so from three, and shooting plus 80 from the free throw line, and so we know he's capable of doing that. This is a player that is dominant in like just about every aspect of the game, but he had a tough shooting year. I don't think there's any reason to dance around that. Now, with that being said, a lot of the things he used to be criticized for when he was 25, he's doing exceptionally better now that, he's 30. And my expectation would be that the same thing will follow, which is he's shown he can shoot, from three. He did it 2 years ago as the MVP with a team without PG. That was a team with Vic, Taj, Ennis, Doug, Domas, Alex, that team. And I'd expect him to become, better next year. But we can't lose sight of the fact that, this is a guy that leads the league in assists to the corner. He leads the league in non-corner, second in the league in non-corner 3 assists, leads the league in assists at the rim. He'll go down as probably the best rebounding guard in the history of the NBA. He's second in the league in loose balls. He improved. He had a good year finishing in the rim and half court. And he shot the ball off the catch from three in the corner, I think at like a 36% clip. He struggled from a couple places on the floor. And listen, like, we need him to have a better year shooting the ball, there's no question. But we can't diminish the fact that he's more or less dominating the game in a lot of these other areas. And, you know, every time somebody seems to say, well, he's not doing this, he's not doing that, a lot of the stuff I just mentioned are things that people said he wasn't doing when he was 25. I'd expect him to put in the work, I'd expect him to come back, and I'd expect him to knock some of those down.
With all those things that he is doing, though, do you feel like you might have to, I mean, you talked about the guys on the roster getting better and becoming better shooters, but might acquisition be part of that equation as well, get better shooters on your roster?
Always. We'll look under every rock. You know, when you look at it, I look at it this way. You know, 3 of the 5 guys starting are shooting 36 to 40. You know, Dennis is a 36% three-point shooter off the catch. We're not going to get shooting out of our 5s as of right now, depending on what happens with Nerlens. You know, but maybe we can push Steven into a development phase where we have him look at that. I mean, he can shoot the ball. We've seen it for years in the practice gym. Everybody here has. You know, internal development is a lot of creativity, imagination, and you got to stick with that through the year. We've seen that with, you know, different players in the league, regardless of age. You know, the backup 4. You know, coming into the year, I thought Patterson. You know, he was starting for a little bit, and then obviously JG took over that spot. But he's been a 35 to 40 3-point shooter. If he's back, which I'd expect him to be, you know, maybe we need to ride that out a little bit longer and rely on him to shoot his career averages, which he has done even the year before. Then, you know, we play 9 guys, so that's not even counting Dre coming back in what he'll do. So that's leaving you, you know, like the Alex spot, which we'll definitely look to try to address. But like I said before, I mean, that's the 9 guys that are playing, and we can either, you know, address those guys, play 10 guys, play differently, or add players from the outside, which we'll absolutely try to do. But, you know, that's totally on me to figure that out.
Sam, you will have a great many fans who will say, you know, 3 straight first-round exits. Why bring a coach back and expect something different? How would you speak to people who want that change?
Well, I mean, I think every team's always changing, you know, and our job isn't to just sit here and react to things. It's to be methodical as we go through things, understand, you know, how we can get better, what the plan is for that. You know, last season, we could have said, listen, the team's not good enough defensively, you know, and we put our heads together and became a better defensive team. But the margins for error are small, you know, and you know, in the Western Conference for sure. But like, to me, that's one of the things like about competition that it doesn't bother me. Like sometimes like you lose. Like competing doesn't mean like you only compete when the wind's at your back. And so, yeah, listen, we're not entitled to anything. Like we don't come into the year expecting to just automatically be served up, you know, opportunities to play in the playoffs. You got to earn those. But you also got to perform when you get there, and we haven't done that. So we got to figure out what that is. And, you know, we've never been shy about the fact that, like, you know, we got to go out and do the work, study it, and make the best decisions for the future of the franchise and the health of the franchise, and that's what we intend to do.
Billy, when you hired
Billy or Sam?
sorry,
Okay.
think about Billy.
No
Great
problem.
guy. Great guy. Sam, when you hired Billy, you mentioned his tactical competence, and know it's probably going to haunt you for the rest of the time we talk about Billy, but where did you see that stand out this season in terms of his tactical competence?
Well, I mean, taking a team that was, you guys were asking me as many questions about the defense last year, and you know, getting it to be a top 5 defense is one part. I think, our after timeout success. I don't have the numbers on that, so I'm very, very careful on that stuff. But I feel like we got good looks coming out of timeouts. When we were going through the Western Conference playoffs in 2016, and within 2 minutes of going to the finals, I mean, I thought he did an excellent job. I don't think he's any different than he was there. So I think he does a really good job. But these jobs are really hard, and you can draw up the best plays, or you can put together what you feel is a really good team, and sometimes it doesn't come to fruition because there's so many other competing factors and forces that are at play. And so, ultimately, it's whether or not all of us, when I say that, I mean every single person in the organization, can we try to get the most out of what we have? And that's a unified thing.
You got a lot of support from ownership in the last few years, committing to the big luxury tax, all that stuff. Is their appetite for that still as strong as ever in the wake of 3 straight first-round exits?
Sure. Well, so, number one, I think all those decisions, all of those conversations happen after the season. So I can't give you a specific answer to that. We'll sit down and debrief. I know that, when we're for 70% of the season, we're playing at that level and we're showing the capability, and having, PG and Russell Westbrook in Oklahoma City, that was really important. And I think our owners deserve an immense amount of credit for a couple of things. Number one, recognizing the opportunity to have, 2 players like that in the second smallest market, understanding that to convince those guys to be here and to sign on takes a lot, in this day and age, and in what the NBA has become. I think they also understand that that's also a sign of not only to the current players, but I think it's also an indication to future players down the line, in different eras of the team, that in Oklahoma City, we're going to do everything we can to try to A, create an environment where you can be at your best, and B, try to win. And so I think that it's twofold in that respect. But yeah, we could chop it up in hindsight and say, this should have happened, that should have happened. Essentially we're paying for the opportunity to have those players. The alternative would be to not have those guys, in Oklahoma City, because there'd be plenty of places that would love to have them.
Did you get what you expected out of Markieff Morris?
Tough. The buyout thing is always hard, in my opinion. I thought he played much better toward the end of the season. The one thing I think he brings to the team, or any team, and one thing I think we need, is he brings an edge. He brings a physicality. He brings a toughness and a competitive maturity. At the same time, he was coming off of being hurt for a little bit. He had no problems while he was here, health-wise. And, we like the way he plays and competes, But the buyout thing is always hard, especially when you're going well. It's hard to work those guys in. We've had it before with Randy Foye and, Karan, Fish. You compete for these guys, and you get them, but assimilating them in is there's no science to it.
Sam, you were asked about Paul earlier. Any clarification can you give on his status and
Sure.
surgery?
Sure. So, with PG, everybody knows that he was battling a couple of different things during the year. Anytime we're dealing with injuries, we work with the player, we work with the agent, we work with our physicians, and we almost always have a specialist or kind of outside doctor that we're working with as well. And, everybody felt comfortable with him playing. He was at no risk of any type of, future injury. But we all knew that when we get to the end of the season, he'd have to be looked at and evaluated. That hasn't happened yet. So he's going to meet with that physician in another city, we'll be there for that consult, and then we'll see where that goes from there.
Is there any clarity you can give on Alex's situation, with how that happened?
You know, I all I could tell you is, it's a personal issue, and Alex is doing well, and I really believe in Alex as a player, and he really was showing great strides. I thought he was gonna have a great year. Unfortunately, it didn't go that way, but. I just not at liberty to talk more about that, other than to say, like, we support him, and he's still part of our family. He's just not part of the team, and I hope he's back on the floor at some point. He's just a really good basketball player.
This is I don't know how it ended up at the end of the year, but for much of the year, you guys were at the top of the league in technical fouls. Even Billy got up there close to the top. The whole league seems to be consumed with complaining to the officials. Yesterday was a marquee game. All anybody's talking about is the officiating. Is that good for basketball? Is that good for the Thunder? If you don't like it, what can you do about it?
Well, I appreciate the perspective that it's not just the Thunder, that people do complain about officiating. If you don't believe that, just go to your local high school, or unfortunately, go to the YMCA. It's a societal transformation in sports, and it's. I think it's a sign of bigger things, in my opinion. like society changes and people express themselves differently, and social media has created a pathway to so many good things, but it also can do some things that aren't productive either. With respect to the technical fouls, we don't come into the year saying we'd like to lead the league or be at the top of the league in technical fouls. Just so we're clear, we address that with the players and try to play the fine line of you can't put players in boxes and say, we want you to play hard, we want you to be passionate, we want you to express yourself, but we don't want you to go over the line. It's a really delicate thing. I think what we would like to have is a team that plays inspired, but not necessarily a team that plays emotional. Because I think the emotional team is easier to play against. I think the inspired team is harder to beat. And that's a conversation that we have internally all the time. With that said, over 82 games, there is going to be some emotion that comes with that. Every team's going to face it. The ability to have that, and then it's all about how you respond, in my opinion. And there's times that we could do better at that. But there's also times where you have to give some latitude to the fact that people are competing, giving everything they have. And there are occasions where calls are missed and the reaction is sudden. And the official's in a position where that's called game management. And everyone manages the game differently. The officials are under an intense amount of pressure as well. And I think the last 2-minute reports are really an intriguing thing. They're obviously there because of the advent of gambling on pro sports. They're difficult because it's not an independent review, right? It's reviewed by the NBA, who produces the report. And it's not entirely transparent because we don't know who's doing the review, which sometimes can create more questions about them. So I understand the need as to why they need to exist, because of what we're facing with gambling and the absolute need for transparency and integrity for our game. There's nothing more important. But there may be some things that we can do to try to maybe take the pressure off the outcome of the calls the next day. I don't know. It's really a question for Adam, but I know it's top of mind for him. They've been working on this forever. And the officials, the best part to me about them is when you run into them in an airport and they're carrying their bag with their little neck pillow, they are allowed to sleep, and they're people, they're humans. they don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to make mistakes. Just like a player doesn't want to miss a shot, you know? The world we live in is so immediate. And sometimes, to be honest with you, sometimes can be a little angry. And you got to have a thick skin. And those guys work really hard. At the same time, you know, it's split-second stuff, and the ability to respond and emotionally regulate is important for every team. But it is every team. We can be better.
We've got a lot of contingencies for all kinds of scenarios. I mean, and you know, I asked you about Russell shooting, and you expect him to come back and do better. What if he comes back and he's the same or he's worse?
Well, I mean, that's possible with everything, you know? I mean, I can't make you a promise, you know, about anything. Like, you could walk outside and it's possible it could be raining and you don't have an umbrella. I can't help you with that, you know? I mean, you're welcome to stay here as long as you want, Eric. But yeah, it's possible. I mean, what you can do is create a plan and work the plan, put the time in. And all I can tell you is, like, we're 2 years away from him shooting 34% and he shot 88% from the free throw line in the playoffs. You know, that's a big jump start to our offense. Like, offensively, like, we had 2 pretty tough games, you know. We had unfortunately we had 2 of the same games that the Spurs had in Game 7 shooting the ball, you know, and that'll happen when you get into small sample size. And we shot the blood out of it for 3 games, but it wasn't enough. They shot it better. But I'd expect Russell to put the time in and come back better. We know he's capable, like I said before. He led the league in a lot of different categories. That doesn't happen by accident either. He's put the time in for that. And then everybody has to get better. It's not about him. You know what I mean? It's really a group effort. And I have to do my part. But, you know, again, my job, I've got to look at, like, how good is this team? You know, what's the capability of the team? You know, what's the path forward for the team? You know, what are we going to do to improve the existing group? What can we do externally to work from there? It's a combination. It never comes down to one person. Just like I said, like, no one's bigger than the organization. No individual's bigger than the organization. You know, it's never one answer to a problem. You know, we got to sort it out.
Do you think you've ever hit your sweet spot this season? And I'm thinking of the 11 of 12 wins. You guys weren't defending like you were previous to that, and yet Paul goes off, Russell facilitates. It's great basketball. So do you think you ever really found, you know, that spot that you wanted to be?
Well, I mean, again, like, yeah, I mean, there's points in the playoffs where, like, if you're looking at segments of a quarter or a game or a half, absolutely. A 10-game stretch. I mean, listen, you can't be, it's like you can't hold one thing down, be good at another, and not have everything. It's everything's interconnected, is what I'm trying to say to you. Like, I don't know that we were ever, like, at our best defensively and our best offensively, but I don't know that any team is. It's an 82-game journey. It's an 82-game process to create a reliable style of play and performance level that can compete under adverse conditions. And the one thing I really did think that was promising to me was the way we played on the road in some big games. Now, the flip side of that is we also came out and played some poor games against some teams that were under 500. So that goes into the mix too, that as we try to evaluate it, like, what's driving that. But as I said, capability, like, we set a standard coming, I say, for 70% of the season, that, you know, some nights we're going to beat you offensively, some nights we're going to beat you defensively. You know, we had some stretches, and we're the second best 3-point shooting team in the league for like 2 months, but then we go to like 28. So there's like inconsistency there that we have to try to find. Now, when the data will tell us that, like, when the ball's moving, we generate pretty good shots, open shots. When the ball's stagnant, we take tougher shots. I mean, I don't think that's, like, if you've watched the Thunder over 10 years, like, You pretty much know that, you know. But I did think we played faster. I did think that when the ball moved, we generated the shots we wanted. I think that you know, people think about efficiency as just simply making shots, but efficiency is also like winning the turnover battle, winning the offensive rebounding battle, winning the defensive rebounding battle. It's all these little games within the game that you have to be really good at. And you know, we looked at it, and I looked at it the other day, and nobody asked about this, but like, you know, we're shooting the three about as well as Denver. You know, we're 0.5 of a point off of Milwaukee. And we're disappointed about it. And we'd like it to be better. I mean, no doubt about it. But I also think, like, we can't be dead last in free throw shooting if we're getting there that much. So it's across the board improvement that needs to happen. And that's you know, that's on all of us, myself, obviously, especially. But if we can add that to a 49-win team with the month of March we had, we'd feel good. But that's also hypothetical. That's got to happen.
You talk about free throw shooting, and obviously that's something that you can, or the players and team control. Just how do you get better? What do they need to do to be able to get better in that area?
You know, we've talked to a lot of people about that, and you know, one thing is we'll have a plan on that. You know, that's something I'm looking forward to speaking to Billy about. You know, Billy is an established coach. He's coached this game for a long time. We feel like we've got certainly capable of doing that, and we've got to make that a priority so we come back a little bit better.
How's Andre doing? When do you expect that he might be 100%?
Dre's doing well. He's, first of all, I mean, he's in incredible spirits considering, you know, some of the setbacks he's had. But that's who he is. You guys saw him up here the other day. You know what I mean? He's buoyant is the way I would refer to him. He's the ultimate teammate. He's helping behind the scenes all the time. And he feels like he's in a really good spot. Now, obviously, we've got the off season to allow that to take its course. So sad because he was so close, you know, to coming back when he had the setback. But, you know, listen, those things happen. It's how you respond to him. He feels great. He's a big part to the team. I think we all know that because he does all the subtle stuff. You know, he's a winning player, and not having him out there was tough. But you know, there's other teams that have injuries too. It's just when you don't have the player for the whole year, you sometimes forget that until you run into a situation where you're like, he was always good against that guy, you know. And you're like, but that's competition. It's how it goes. You know, you gotta account for it. I just keep coming back to the fact I think Ferg showed that he has the makings of being an elite defender at 20 years old. Once he gets through the officiating gauntlet and they understand, like, he's going to be here, he's going to learn the tricks of the trade a little bit, just like Dre did, I think that he has a chance to be a really good player. And he's got a good mindset about it. And one thing I would say is Andre Robertson deserves a lot of credit for helping that guy, which is, to me, a tremendous sign of what we want to be. We'll get them all. I promise you.
Juwan Evans, what's your plan from this summer, and could that impact?
I mean, listen, like we're at a situation where you can't add a two-way player after a certain date. We had an open spot. You know, it'd be an interesting player for us to look at. He was good for our playoff prep. He did a great job for that. We'll have him around in the summertime. And, you know, strategically, that's like just you claim him off waivers because there's no one you can sign at that point. So to that spot. So we did that, and I enjoyed getting to know him a little bit. Obviously, watched him for a while. He's a hard worker, and we'll see what he does this summer.
Sam, it's one player's take, but it was an interesting take. Like last week, Dennis said, you know, that Billy's a guy who listens to players, and there's good and bad in that. And sometimes when he listens too much, it can go the wrong way. I wonder if do you feel like there's a strong culture of accountability here, and if not, is it something you would want to discuss?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think every coach has their own voice. Every coach has their own style. And, you know, I don't know everything that Dennis said, but at the end of the day, Billy's in charge of what takes place on the floor and ultimately charting the path as to, what's going to get the best performance out of the team. Clearly, there are times where we're playing an extremely high level, 70% of the year, and he was obviously hitting the right buttons, and you weren't not you specifically, but those questions weren't being asked. But you lose in the first round, and as I said before, everything gets magnified. That's part of it. And so we'll sit down, and these are some of the things that, when you sit down with a coach, you want to hear, what do you think? How can we get better? What do you think about the team? How do we go into off season into season, laying out those goals and hitting them? I think the big question for us is, we established this level and this standard coming in. Something was different. We have the baseline to measure, and I just think understanding what that is, not saying, specifically individually, but as a group, because everything touches that stuff. And no one's better to have that opinion or that I want to hear than Billy's, because he's the person that's managing that on a regular basis, kind of, and dealing with the group. And he's done a really good job while he's been here. So I'd like to hear that and, figure out what we're going to do, how he feels about mapping out a plan to maybe, sustain it through the season.
Sam, you mentioned the emotional team is easy to beat, and I don't want to imply anything, but is that something that you feel that you need to have conversations with Russell Westbrook, just because it's a fine line? You want him to play with that intensity. That's what makes him a great player. But is that an area in which you feel he can improve upon?
Well, listen, I think it's kind of like the age-old question. First, I mean, the implication that those conversations haven't been had or that we're not having them, we're always talking to our players, but we also have to recognize that the same things that I think you're implying are the same things that people are cheering when we win, right? When we're winning, everybody is celebrating whatever it is that they're criticizing when we don't win. The question is, are we, is that helping us win? You know what I mean? If it is, we got to keep it. If it's not, then we probably need to limit it. But a player like Russell is expending so much energy. He's leaving everything he has on the floor. He's competing for himself, his teammates, his team. There's going to be some emotion in that. That's a big reason why we have bounced back and navigated from a lot of different things during the season. Does that mean that you can't take time to look at every aspect of performance? No. Does that mean we're shying away from having that conversation? No. But that's all right. That's part of relationship. That's part of trying to improve. That's natural. I can't help that not everybody can see every conversation we have, but we also can't have him taking away that, because, as you said earlier, the emotional team is easier to play against, but a team that lacks confidence is even easier to play against. So you have to have confidence. You have to have some stick to you, which the last time I checked, I don't think he's short on. But that's part of the reason why we've been really good. And I'm not going to sit up here and deny that. He's driven that engine for quite a long time.
Well, Sam, do you think it's possible for him to shed some of the emotion that creates technical fouls and three-pointers very early in the shot clock without a pass, but keep all the emotion that makes him so competitive, that's created 3 straight triple-double seasons? I mean, there is there's a balancing act.
Well, I think there's evolution. Here's what I'd say about that. I know he probably wouldn't want to, he may not realize it, but he's really evolved as a player, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm not going to dissect that, but the bottom line is like I said earlier, when you're 25 years old and you're getting criticized for all these things, you look up, you're 30, and you're doing a lot of those things significantly better, there's evolution. This, you know, he wasn't, like I said earlier, like he wasn't hitting the corners like he hits the corners now. You know, I mean, listen, I don't know if they're keeping stats like this, but he's second in the league in loose balls. Like I think that's been pretty regular. He took more. He finished better around the rim. His shot distribution was actually, you know, trending. You know, and a little bit different than it's been in the past. He's missing right now. He didn't shoot the ball well this season, but you know, I don't think that's a sign that he's not evolving. I think he is evolving in some ways, you know. But I know he may not want that moniker, but the bottom line is he has evolved. Now, is he going to get better? I think he will, because all the things that we just rattled off were things that I don't think he, you know, he's done regularly throughout his career, and there's a gargantuan will that exists inside this human being that I think is going to win the day, you know, and I think he will come back. And but there, yeah, for sure, there's always evolution possible, and I think that he has evolved. I do think that some of the last 2 months maybe, you know, overshadows that a little bit. But that's part of it. When you lose, like that's what happens. You gotta eat that. You gotta own that. We, as an organization, you gotta move on.
Billy, what role, if any, has? I called you Billy again.
Did you sleep? Did you sleep last night?
Right name, but he's
Did you sleep last night?
Every question.
You up prepping for this like that
I
hard?
was up thinking about Billy Donovan and his future. Sam Presti. We talk about all the rough stuff that's come with Russell this season, but he has developed. He's developed in the past 3 years, and I wanted to ask you, what role do you think Billy's played in that in these past few years of Russell built?
I mean, probably better ask Russell that question, but I mean, obviously, Billy's the coach, and he's been a part of that. I think anytime, like, the head coach and the lead guard are always going to have a relationship and a give and take, and there'll be ebbs and flows of that naturally, no matter what, because you got to work so closely together. I think both of those guys spoke to that in their media availability at the end of the season. And I think that, you know, Russell wants to be really good at what he does. He cares a lot. He carries a pretty big weight. I think that needs to be respected. I think Billy carries a pretty big weight as well. You know, these are important roles and important positions. And they're vital, you know, but yeah, of course, I think that the partnership is important to be able to continue to evolve, and that doesn't mean everybody has to like hug each other all the time either. Like that's okay. Like, you know, we're comfortable with that, but for the most part, I think that Russell's evolution has been pretty significant over the last 3 years.
Sam.
Last one to matter.
Got your name right.
Yeah.
That's why I was listening to it. When you're talking about Westbrook shooting and having contingency plan, essentially, if it doesn't get better. This year was a year when you expected it to be better, and it wasn't. How do you feel like you guys did as an organization preparing for that?
What I said was not specific to Russell, but specific to Alex. So, you know, it's a little bit different. Like I was saying earlier, like the guys I listed off, the core of the team, the guys that are playing the minutes, you know what I mean? They're the ones also taking the shots, most of the shots, you know, from Jeremy, who we haven't even talked about. It's kind of remarkable, you know, he led the team in three-point shooting. I don't know that I foresaw that coming, but credit to him. Terrence, PG, Steve, Dennis, Russ, probably leaving somebody out. But yeah, I mean, that to me, like, getting some bumps in those areas is especially where we are from a cap standpoint. I mean, like, there's a price for longevity, right? We've had 2 CBA changes during this run. We've had style of play changes, and the reality is that the team that we have today was built off the back of the summer of 2016. It wasn't a blank canvas that we could meticulously craft. And I know that seems like a long time ago, but like we had a decision to make after that. And we chose to keep competing and keep advancing, knowing that it was going to be hard to do that. But I just think that we've always looked ahead and said, let's sort it out, let's figure it out. And we'll do everything we can to look at all the ways we can bring in guys that can help the crew, help the team, that we feel like we can help or we can grow, and they can have an impact. At the same time, we're also going to look internally because I don't think players are static. They never have been, right? So we never, I should say, I don't think anyone anticipated Jeremy Grant taking on the role that he did this season. He wasn't even starting this year. He was playing backup 5 last year, right? And he's our starting 4 and leading the team in three-point shooting. So players aren't static. And the contingency planning I was referring to is, like, I think if we have Alex, I think we're a better team that way. But improved free throw shooting would have also an improvement. But I've got to have a better plan for that spot. As I said earlier, you look at the group of guys I mentioned. Luckily they're all under contract, and that's I don't know, was that 6 guys or so. We play 9, and so you got to have someone in the slot Alex was playing. Maybe that's Nader. He showed some real promise. I don't know. Maybe it's someone outside. We got to figure out what Nerlens is doing. I think Pat may be back. Has a long history of being a pretty good shooter in the league. I feel badly about just kind of some of the breaks that's gone against him. But he's a relatively proven guy. And then we got to fix that spot that we talked about for sure.
Sam, when you talk about not having that contingency for Alex, did you think you did before that, or did you think? Well, when the season started, did you?
No. I said what I say, Barry, is like we were coming into the season, basically, really concerned about the defensive drop off from last season because that was what we sat here and talked about, and Dre had an existing situation that we needed to account for, and so we tried to fortify that in the event he was slow to recover. We also brought Dennis in. We thought he would be playing, bulk minutes there. And I thought Alex was going to be a really big part of the team. And it didn't end up happening that way. So that can happen, My guess is that if we do something, if this team, no team stays the same, but in the event that let's just say this team was exactly the same next season, and we went and filled that role with somebody that's an expert shooter, there'll be something else we're sitting here talking about at the end of the year, unless you're the last team standing. Every team's built that way. It's just how it works, So I get that. I think if Alex is available and playing, I think it would help us. Would it solve all these problems? No, there'd be something else that we would be wanting to address because that's what we do. That's how you look at things. Nothing's ever good enough. It shouldn't be. You want to always try to make it better. But in terms of where you had to put your reinforcements, I'm glad we put them where we did because we really did lose Dre. And the pain of losing Alex, it was really more prominent once we got to March. That's when we really started to feel it because we were playing really well up until then. But that's when we missed. We missed him a great deal. That's how it goes. So, did that answer your question?
And you can't fill every hole. You don't have unlimited resources. There's not unlimited ball players out there.
Yeah,
I just wondered if you knew that was a problem in October. A potential
Oh, do you mean
problem.
Alex's situation?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
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 You thought you'd be in okay shape.
No, yeah, I was worried about how the hell we were going to keep Alex.
Well, I'm talking about if something happened to him. Because 'Cause
Well,
you
you'd be-
said it's on you that you didn't have a contingency
I,
if something happened to Alex.
well, I can't sit up here and not take accountability. You know, I can't, because at the end of the day, like, I mean, I can't read the future, but I'm accountable for sometimes reading the future, and it didn't go our way that way. I made a bet that Alex was going to be a really good player for us going out, and unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, and it happened late in the year. And Wes Matthews went to Indiana, and you know, that's sports. Like, you can't fill every role, and like we couldn't foresee that we're going to lose Nerlens because Andrew Wiggins was going to hit him in the head with an elbow. Like, that's sports. Like, hindsight bias, like that's something that, in my position, like, I don't want to, like, I can't operate in that. Like, you can't unravel everything, because these are human beings. Things happen, performance issues, you know, personal issues. You got to adapt and adjust, and, you know, no team season goes the way they want. I mean, you know, as I said before, Pat was starting. He was not in the rotation at the end of the year. You know, we got Keefe. You know, he did some things for us, but no team finishes the same way they start. And sometimes you find things through that. In my opinion, that's Ferg, right? We got a good look at Diallo. We got a good look at Ferg. Dre was helping both those guys. Burton helped us win a huge game in Houston. He helped us beat Portland. Nader showed us some things. You know, I actually think Kevin Hervey with the Blue had a good year. You know, those things are happening under the surface. We're not talking about those here now because, as I said before, when you lose in the first round, people are pulling at the things that are more present. But I actually think that we had a pretty good development year relative to those guys getting some opportunity. Unfortunately, it was coming at the expense of the fact that we were missing a couple guys. But, like, you know, I'm always looking at where the silver lining is to try to figure out where the good part is when there's a bad situation. And then you move forward from there.
Thank you, Sam.